From Singular Sound, I'm Joe Vitale Jr. And this is the Aeros Loop Studio Gold Edition. Before we dive in today, I'd like to invite all of you to subscribe to our channel so you get all the news, information, and updates on all of our groundbreaking products here at Singular Sound. Let's dive in. So let's talk about some of the new hardware updates to the new Aeros Loop Studio Gold Edition. The first thing you're going to notice are the familiar 4-foot-friendly oversized toggle switches, but now they come in gold. But that's not the only thing. Check this out. The switches now are virtually silent, and this is a huge update to the hardware. Let's talk about Autoquantize. What it does is allows you in freeform mode to be able to play whatever you want, and the Aeros will use an algorithm to adjust itself to whatever you're playing on the fly and quantize it in time. It comes at a maximum of 16 measures that you can do, and if you're not exactly sure how many measures you're going to have when you're playing, just leave it set to auto. Now, when you go to record, the very first track that you record to, that's going to be the basis for how the algorithm works to detect the tempo that you're playing through. And the typical range is between 80 to 160 for the tempo detection range. Now, to make this a little easier to hear what it's doing exactly, I have also set the click track to go out of the main out, so you'll get that as well. Normally, you wouldn't have the click track going out of the mains, but I want you to hear how this works together with the Autoquantize method. So we're going to go just create a quick new song. We go into properties, and we're going to scroll down first of all to song grid mode. We're going to put that on auto, and then we're going to scroll down to set length. Now I had set this earlier to 2, but as you can see, you can dial this up all the way to 16. All right, so now that we've set that, let's hit save. All right, so now what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start playing, and then I'm going to show you another way when you start playing the same thing, but because we have it set to 2 measures, this is how it adjusts to itself. So I'm just going to play something very simple. And as you can hear, it's following right along with what I'm playing. Now, let me stop that. Now, let's do the same thing. I'm going to play it twice as long, and you'll see how it adjusts to what I just played. Now, as you can see, the click is now half the amount of beats that it was before, and the reason for that is because we set it to 2 measures. So with what I was playing, even though it technically would maybe be 4 measures in how you would be counting it normally, because I played it longer, it actually slows the actual click down, but it still keeps it perfectly in sync, and it's doing this right on the fly. All right, let's talk about MIDI and the Aeros Loop Studio. First thing we need to do is go down to settings. We're going to go to MIDI. Now you have 2 choices here, MIDI in or MIDI out. Let's first take a look at MIDI out. All right, I'd like to also mention here, when MIDI mode is set to transmitter, the Aeros will send out its own internal clock, time signature, transition, start and stop commands all to the MIDI output. And if you scroll down, you're going to see some additional options here. First off, you've got your MIDI channel, your MIDI mode, as we mentioned previously, your MIDI output, and these can also be individually turned off, mind you. Your clock sync, time signature, transition, RPO command, start first recording, stop, send stop at empty part. Now let's go back out of here for a moment. Let's go to MIDI in. Now I'd like to mention this. When the MIDI mode is set to transmitter, it's going to ignore any incoming clock, but it's still going to respond to any incoming CC commands that are not filtered. And the way you filter those is through this button up here at the top. And you're going to have this list of options that you can scroll through here. And at the bottom, you can also filter MIDI CC by none, all, or custom. Then you have additional options here. All right, let's talk about Autorecord now. Autorecord basically is a setting that allows the Aeros to wait for you to start playing. Now, normally you would hit record, and if you have a count off, that'll come in, or it goes straight into recording. The way this works is this: you have to cross a certain audio level threshold, which on board its default is -40, but you can adjust that with a slider. You arm a track, and then it's waiting for you to start playing. Once you start playing, the regular overdub and other record functions go back to normal. Once Autorecord is enabled, the Autorecord threshold slider is turned on. This determines the threshold at which the audio signal level input triggers Autorecord function inside of the Aeros Loop Studio. By default, it's set to -40, and that's a good place to start, so we're going to leave it right there. Let's say, some people have a little bit of trouble hitting the record button and playing at the same time. This takes that out of the equation. This allows you to just play, and it lets the artist just concentrate on being creative. Okay, let me show you how Autorecord is actually implemented. Now, I've created a song here called Autorecord, and I've given myself a 1-measure count in. And then you're going to notice, though, right away, that normally these labels say record, but because we changed that setting in behaviors, it now says arm. And what that means is this: it is going to wait for an audio signal coming from whatever instrument I have plugged into the Aeros to cross -40 before it will actually start the unit. Now, because I do have a count in of 1 measure, as soon as I cross the threshold, it's going to start the count off and then record on 1. If you had the count in set to 0, as soon as it crossed the threshold, it would go right into record. So this way, though, I can hear the tempo and what I'm actually playing against. So here we go. We're going to arm a track, and we're going to make some noise. Here we go. All right, we've now created our initial loop, and you're going to notice now where it said arm, now it says record and overdub. So it goes now back to normal operation when you want to add something to it. So let's add like just an arpeggio kind of thing over top of it here, a little part. So we're going to just hit record like normal. Okay, let's now talk about the hands-free slide-out menu. When you're in the Loop Studio, to open the hands-free slide-out menu, you're going to want to press and hold down the lower left button, and then you're going to see the slide-out menu come from the right side of the screen. Now, I'd also like to mention that the hands-free slide-out menu is customizable to what is actually in it and the order. Now, under this menu, you can use the scroll wheel here on the right to cycle through these, and whatever you're highlighting, you can use the right button to select it, or you can use the left button to close it. So let's say my hand was the foot. You can then go save song, clear song, delete last part, open album, new song 2x2, new song 6x6, mixer, switch RPO, MIDI mode. There's some different options underneath there, and there's a separate sub menu there. Lock track, unlock track, copy song, home, song settings, previous song, next song, sleep screen. Now let's take a look at the hands-free slide-out menu in playing mode. Start the Aeros. We're now in playing mode. Same process, hold down the left button. It's going to open up the hands-free slide-out menu on the right. Now we have some different options in this order. And these are individually assignable and customizable inside of the settings menu. We'll go through that in a little bit. We have the mixer, switch RPO, undo, mute, reverse, solo, fade to mute, lock track, unlock track. Now, I'd like to mention that all these options are individually assignable to the top track or to the bottom track by using the middle or right hand buttons. So for example, let's say we want to put it on mute again. Let's mute the top track. Here it comes up. This is going to keep everything in time. Now we've muted that top track. Okay, let's take a look at 6x6 mode now for the hands-free slide-out menu. In play mode, you're going to have some different options. Same process, hold down that left-hand button. It's going to open up the hands-free slide-out menu, use your scroll wheel, and then you're going to have mixer, switch RPO, undo, mute, reverse, solo, fade to mute, lock track, unlock track. Now, you're going to notice, unlike the other version where it was in 2x2 where it could apply to the top track or the bottom track, you can now select that or hit the next track, or you can close it. So in this particular instance, let's go to mute. And we're now going to mute this bottom track here because that's the one that was selected. But let's go back into that a second. And let's go down to, let's select, let's use the next track button. So as you can see, it's going to cycle through these different tracks that I have playing here. Let's mute the top track, even though you can't hear it right now. Let's hit mute. It's going to bring up, open the mute. And now that track is muted. Now I'd also like to mention, along with the Loop Studio, you also have a hands-free slide-out menu in the Songs menu. And it's the same process. You're going to hold down that left-hand button. It's going to open up the hands-free slide-out menu here on the right. And then you can use your scroll wheel again to cycle through Song Info, Delete, Move, Copy, Multi-Select. Now I'd like to also mention you have an Info tab that you could also click on to get additional information in that particular menu. Now going along with the hands-free redesign, you're going to notice that the Loop Studio has a little gray box around it. And if you scroll with the scroll wheel here, you're going to notice that box start to move. Using your foot, you can cycle through all the different functions simply by moving the scroll wheel. And then you can use the select button here on the right to activate that. You can use this button to actually activate the songs or back out. You can use these two buttons to select the internal or SD card without even having to touch these. So if you want to go internal, then you can cycle through using, again, the scroll wheel. Now you can still use your hands if you want to. All right, let's take a look at a new feature inside the Songs menu. Now, when you go into the Songs menu option, you're going to notice now that you can categorize your songs into albums as well as the songs. So this way, now you can make a folder, let's say, of all your originals that you want to do. Or this is one you use in the studio, or this one you use live, or these are cover songs. You can now categorize those to make this much easier to find what you need. And on top of that, you can now copy and move songs between these folders. So you could literally make a duplicate of the one song in all your different folders. So you could even have a backup folder. So in the event of something catastrophic happening, you have a backup. Okay, let's create an album. To do that, you're going to see a little blue box with a white plus symbol in it in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to hit that. This will give you now a new naming field to name the album. You're going to click in the little text field. We'll just call this for now Covers. Okay. Then you drop down the keyboard, hit save, and now you have a new folder. Now we can go into that folder two ways. You can either touch it on the screen, or using the scroll wheel, you can now highlight it, hit select, and now we're inside of that album. And then you can add a song like you're used to. Hit the plus symbol again. Now we can create a song in there. And then through this, you have some different options. When you're done, hit save, and now you're ready to go. Another new amazing feature that I'm very excited about is the ability to use backing tracks with the Aeros. So let me show you how to load one of those. The first thing you need to do is, while the Aeros is powered off, put a blank SD card into the reader that's formatted to FAT32. Now this is going to format it to the file system of the Aeros, but not format the chip itself. You're going to notice that there's now a backing tracks folder now on the SD card. This will allow you to drag and drop files from your computer right onto this new folder, and then you can add them to your new songs that you're creating inside the Aeros. Now these files that you're going to be dragging to this new folder have to be 44.1 kilohertz and 24-bit in PCM wave format. They can be both mono or stereo. Now, once you've brought the SD card back over to the Aeros and you've inserted the card, here's how you create a new song to use backing tracks. The first thing you need to do is create a new song. We're going to go into the song properties here. And then the first thing we're going to do is this. We have to scroll down to song grid mode. We're going to change this to freeform. Then we're going to hit save. Once the new song is done saving, we're going to go back into the song properties, and we're going to scroll down to where it says, you see where it says song grid mode, we've put it to freeform. And now you're going to notice there's a new option called backing track. Hit select file. This will open up the backing tracks folder, and we can select one. So in this case, we have these three different choices. Let's take the first one there. Hit save. And as you can see now, that backing track is loaded into track 1, or the top track. Now if we hit go, now you can see we've got the new backing track playing. And you'll notice at the bottom there, you can now record or overdub. So you can record to the second track here, or you can overdub on top of the backing track. Now I'd also like to mention you can do this in 6x6 mode as well. We're going to go down, we're going to change this to 6x6, hit save. Once it's done saving, we're going to go back in. You're going to notice we have that same backing track option. Hit save. And as you can see now, we now have the backing track in track number 1. Okay, another really cool thing you can do with backing tracks in the Aeros Loop Studio is the ability to do a different backing track per part. And there's just a little bit different procedure you have to do. Now, the first thing after you've created your song, we're going to go in there. And at this point, you would have already set the song grid mode to freeform and hit save. But we're going to set sync tracks now to off. And then we're going to scroll down. And you're going to see the backing track folder option. In this case, we're going to use these first two. So we're going to grab the first one, hit save. And then we're going to hit next part. Go into song properties again. Go down to select backing track file. Hit start. Now we have our track playing along here. Now, same as last time, you could record or overdub. You can record into the bottom track or you can overdub over top of that. But let's move on now to the second part of this. And here comes part number 2. And now we have part number 2 playing. Now this same procedure also applies to 6x6 mode. So let's go back into the song properties and scroll down now to backing track file. And we can also, let's do the next track here. And as you can see here, we now have 2 different backing tracks running. And just like in 2x2 mode, you can also run a different backing track in each different part. All right, let's talk about fade time. In the settings menu, fades have now been given their own category, so it's very easy to find. When you're fading out, if you hit timed, and you can use this slider to adjust that. And these are in 1-second increments. So let's pull that across. And you can go between 1 and 60 seconds for fade time. In this new menu item, you can now set the start and stop, mute and unmute fade times. If set to auto, the fade time will be set to the longest loop in that particular part. Also, the stop, mute, unmute will follow the stop, mute, unmute settings for length. And it will happen with either end of measure, end of loop, or immediate. All right, let's go through the new expression pedal setup. Now the expression pedal input on the back of the unit will say EXP in. First thing we need to do is go to settings, down to pedal. And then we're going to toggle on the enable. So we've now enabled the expression pedal. This, where it says current value, gives the current position of the actual pedal itself. Now you can use any expression pedal you want to use, but first we need to calibrate it. So you go down to calibrate, hit start. Now the first thing you need to do is you need to set its maximum position. So what I like to do is I like to pull the pedal all the way back, push it forward, and hit set max. Then you want to pull it back to its minimum position. Pull it back, hit set minimum. Now you can confirm this, you can restart the process, or you can cancel it using these 3 buttons at the bottom. We're going to confirm that, and we're going to go back out of this, and we're going to show you how this works now. We're going to go into the Loop Studio. And I'd like to mention now, when you move the pedal forward, This controls the master volume output. All right, let's talk about off-screen actions. As the saying goes, knowledge is power, and when you're performing, you have to know what's coming up, especially when you're looping. Now, this is another very useful tool in the new firmware update, and what it does is this. Let's say you have a track, and you're recording a little bit longer than normal loop, and it goes beyond the scope of the screen. What this function will do is it will give you a progress bar that will rise from the bottom to the top of whichever track you're recording into, whether it be the track number 1 or track number 2 in this particular instance, because we're in 2x2 mode. Now, what this indicates is how long it will be till the event bar appears on the screen. And the event bar is that little bar that says like recording and so forth as it's coming across before you would actually start recording. All right, let's talk about the count-in revamp. The count-in has been simplified, but it's also been expanded. So let's go down to settings. Let's go to behavior. We're going to scroll down to the count-in, as you can see here. Now what you can do is set the count-in to occur on record, on playback, on both, or on neither. Now, as you see, it says here, count-in first track. When that is enabled, it's going to do the count-in on the very first track in a song part, but it's not going to do it on the other tracks from a stop state. I'd also like to mention now the count-in can now be set from 0 to 99 measures. If it's set to 0, there will be no count-in whatsoever, and it will come right in on record. You now have USB access to both the internal memory and the SD card memory. Before, you'd have to usually move the files from the internal memory to the SD card in order to transfer them to a computer. But now you can plug a USB jack right in the side, plug it right into your computer, and have access to the internal memory. Now, in order to do this, you have to first power down the unit. Then you want to plug in the USB jack into your computer and into the Aeros. Then you want to turn the Aeros back on. Otherwise, it will not read the internal memory and you will have to reboot. Similarly, with the SD card, in order to access it, you need to power off the unit, plug in the USB cable, have your SD card in the reader, turn it on, and then you'll be able to access that as well. There have been several improvements to the log. To get there, we're going to go to Settings, Diagnostic, and then here we have the active logger and a variety of other different tests, from Wi-Fi tests and so forth. There are now 5 log files instead of 2. Now, I'd also like to mention this. When the active logger is set to on, and that will require a reboot of the system in order to turn it on, because when you go to turn it on, you'll see this message. We're not going to do that right now. When the active logger is on, it uses a lot of the CPU, so what it can potentially do is cause clicks or pops to occur during writing or recording, so you only want to use the active logger when you're troubleshooting. All right, let's talk about now how you copy a song inside of the Songs menu. First thing you need to do is go into the Songs directory. We're going to go in the internal memory. And we're going to go into this album I have created called Covers. Now, we have a couple placeholder songs here we can use to demonstrate this. So the first thing we need to do is we need to open up the hands-free slide-out menu in the Songs directory, and there's 2 ways to do that, using the lower left-hand button, or close that. You can also click the 3 dots in the corner. That will also open up this menu. And then you can sort these by date, ABC, or custom. And you'll notice when you're in custom mode, the reorder songs option will appear. That's the only way to reorder the songs. Now, presently, you'll notice we're in the Covers directory that I created earlier. We're going to copy this song into a new album called Vitale Songs. So you can select either one of these by using the scroll wheel, but for the moment, we're going to use the top one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open up the hands-free slide-out menu. We're going to keep it on the current sort method. And as you go through these, you have Songs Info, Delete, Move, Copy, and Multi-Select. But for the moment, we need Copy. So we're going to select that. And now we have a choice of where we want to send it. We can either send it to any of these 3 folders that are in the current internal memory, or we can hit the center button and use the SD card. But we're going to go to Vitale Songs. And you'll hit the right side button for copying songs. And now it is copying that song into that directory. You're going to notice now there is a 1 in parentheses. That is the copied song in that directory. Now, the other way to copy songs is inside of the Loop Studio. here we have cover 1. That's the one that's loaded up currently in memory. What we need to do is open up the stopped hands-free slide-out menu, and we're going to scroll down to Copy Song. Hit Select. We have now copied that song into the same directory that it's already in, and you're going to see now there's a little parentheses around the 1. We can also use this method to move songs. And let's take these 2 songs. We're going to open up the hands-free slide-out menu again. This time we're going to go down to Multi-Select. And we're going to use these radio buttons to select these 2. Now you could do this individually too, but this is a way to bulk move these. Let's put these into the songs directory here. And that is now moving those songs in that directory. Going back into the hands-free slide-out menu, let's reorder these. Now, in order to do that, we need to go over to Custom. Then we can go down to Reorder Songs. Now, there's 2 ways to do this. You can use the little arrows over here on the right, and let's say you want to move song 5 down 1. That's fine. You can confirm that. Now those have been moved. But there's another way to do that. Now, the other way to change the order is to open up the slide-out menu, and then we're going to toggle Reorder Songs. And then we're going to hit the middle button where it says Move. And now we can use the scroll wheel to change the position of the highlighted song. So let's put that one at the top. Hit Finish and Confirm. And the great part about this is it allows you to change the order of the songs right before you go on stage. You now have a default naming convention. Now, to get into this setting, we're going to go to Settings, System, and then the very first field you're going to see is Default Naming Convention. Now, what this means is this. Anytime you create a brand new song, it's going to give it a default name, in this case song, and then usually an underscore and a number. But we can change that. Finish. Now let's go back into the Songs menu. Now, to save some time, I created an album here called Covers. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new song. And as you can see now, the song default name is cover_1. All right, let's talk about one press song part change. For those of you who like to record in 6x6 mode, you're going to love this next feature. So if you're using 2x2 mode, it's very, very simple to go between parts because you're only using 2 sections. With 6x6 mode, there's a lot more complexity to it. But now using the next part button, you can now switch between these sections sequentially. To get the most out of this function and this feature, you're going to want to set the change parts behavior to end of loop to get the most out of it. This way you have a little bit more time to figure out what part you want to go to rather than have it be at the beginning. Now, to save a little bit of time, I already have created a song with 6 different parts, but I'm only using 1 track in each section because I just want to show you how this operation works. So we're going to start the song up. All right, so here we have it playing. Now, as you're going to notice here, instead of saying select part, it says next part down here in the lower left-hand corner. So when you hit next part, it's going to sequentially go through 1 through 6, but you can skip through them as long as you are doing it within the measure. So for example, let's go from 1 to 2 here, just show you that first part. And now we're in part 2. Now let's say you want to go to 4 though. You can skip while it's in the measure. Now let's say you wanted to go just to normal next one. And let's go now skip 6 and go back to 1. As you're navigating the Aeros and you're looking at the various menus and screens, you're going to notice at the bottom here a label, in this case they're green, and they're associated with a corresponding button. Now you can use these buttons for hands-free navigation. You can also use the labels themselves as buttons. All right, for all of you that love multiple time signatures and tempos, you're going to love this next feature. So what this does, it'll allow you to, let's say, play in 4/4 in part 1, and let's say you want to do 5/4 in part 2. So this is how you set that up. You can do this when you're initially creating the song, but I've already created this. We're going to enable it, and you're going to notice now it opens up the time signature for part 1 and for part 2. Now we have it set for 4/4 in part 1, and let's go to 5/4 for part 2. So I'm going to record a track now here, and I'm going to show you how this works between the two sections. So that's our first track. Now let's go to the next part. And now when we switch between those parts, now let me show you the multimeter in 6x6 mode. We're going to leave that just as the default name. And then let's scroll down to where it says here, change it to 6x6 mode. Then let's go down to multimeter. You already have it enabled still from the last time. But now what you can do is you're going to see part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, and part 6. So literally in 6x6 mode, you can have every single section be a different meter. So if you want to have, let's say, part 1 in 4/4, you can then have all the other ones in, you could go 2/4, 4/4, 3/4, 6/4, 5/4, whatever your heart desires. Now to go along with multiple meters, you can also do multiple tempos. So let's show you how that works. So we're going to go into songs. Now normally it's going to be set on global, and you're going to have one tempo set for both parts. But let's say you want to give part 2 just a hair bit more energy, or just have it radically shift. You can now do that. So go to multi, it's going to now bring up 2 sliders, because we're in 2x2 mode. So you have part 1 is set to 112, but let's maybe make, here, we'll make part 2 122. I would also like to mention that you can do the multiple meters or multiple tempos or both. And it works as the same in 2x2 mode as well as 6x6. In 2x2 mode, you can have 2 different meters or 2 different tempos. Or in 6x6 mode, you can have 6 different meters and 6 different tempos. Let's talk about Autorecord Next Track Toggle. This is kind of a game changer, and I love this new feature. To get to this feature, we're going to go to Settings, Behavior, and then you're going to scroll down toward the bottom. And as you can see here, it says Next Track Record 6x6 on. Now it comes as default as on, and what this feature does is this. Normally when you're recording in 6x6 mode, when you go to a new track, it's going to automatically start recording into that new track. But let's say you're building like a percussive groove and you just want to think about what you want to play there, or maybe you just don't want to automatically start recording into that new track as soon as you switch parts. With this feature turned off, you will then manually have to hit record, and that gives you a little more control in deciding what you want to play. Now there's nothing wrong with either side, this comes down to preference, but it gives you a lot more customization and a lot more control over the Aeros. All right, let me show you how Autorecord Next Track Toggle works in actual implementation. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the Loop Studio, and I already have a song set up here, and we're in 6x6 mode. Here we go. Okay, so we have a loop here. Now, we're gonna hit Next Track, which is the center button, and you're gonna see how it's armed and ready to fire right as soon as we go. So here we go. It's gonna wait till it gets to that cycle point. So you can see how that works. And then if you hit Next Track again, it's gonna arm it again and ready for the next track. Now what we can do is we can disable when you hit Next Track where it's already armed to record. Now this will make you so you have to manually hit record, but it gives you more time to think about what you're doing. All right, so Next Track record 6x6, we're gonna disable that. We're gonna go out. We're gonna go back in the studio. We're gonna do the exact same thing we just played, but you'll see how this works a little bit different and you'll see what the benefit of this is. Here we go, same part. So we have this now playing. When I hit the middle button for next track, watch what it does. It's given me the track, so it's now going to be available to record into, but it's not armed and automatically recording. Okay, now let's make another one. It's got the placeholder ready, but we have to still hit manual and record. Let's talk about loop decay. All right, what loop decay is this? You're going to record your first track, and this is your first loop. We're going to call this the bass layer. And then each time you hit the overdub button on that, it's going to reduce it by whatever percentage you have set in the settings menu. Now, it comes default at 50%, but you could make it 100% if you want, but if you set it to 100, it's going to literally go, anything underneath it's going to go to 0, so there'll be nothing underneath it. But you can adjust this, and each time you hit overdub, it's going to keep dropping the volume by whatever percentage you have set in there. Now this gives you a very unique and creative way to approach looping. I'd also like to mention that this is a destructive process, so if you're going to try this, try duplicating a song so you're not affecting that original recording. So I've created a new song here called Loop Decay. Now what we're going to do is this. I'm going to go into the properties and show you how you adjust this. So we're going to go into here. And you can program this when you're creating the song too, but you can also go in later under the properties and adjust it. So we're going to scroll down to where it says Loop Decay. And you're going to see on or off. In this case, I already have it turned on. And you're going to see loop decay rate. And right now it's set to 50, which means the volume will decrease by 50% every time I overdub a new layer. Okay, that's now what we're going to call the bass layer. Now watch this. I'm going to hit overdub. Watch, it's going to change color, but now watch what happens when I hit overdub and listen to the volume level. It's now decreased by 50%. We're going to hit it again. It's now decreased by another 50%. And so forth. So, okay, so the reason I showed it to you like that is I wanted you to see what it does visibly. Now I'm going to play along with it and build a track on top of it. Listen to how that initial bass layer starts to fade into the background as each time I record, it will now drop by 50%. All right, that's our initial bass layer. As you can hear, the background is now decreased in volume. As it decays in volume each time you overdub, this gives you some other additional options that you can use just to be creative live and just, give you a completely different sound. Okay, this is the process to update to the new firmware. Okay, now that we have the Aeros up and running, let's take a look at what current version of the operating system and firmware that we have to see if we can have any new updates. As you can see, we're currently running under Aeros 4.0 operating system. Let's upgrade this. Now, while you can use the Wi-Fi to effortlessly download and install the updates to the firmware and operating system, you can also do this manually. Let's say there's a new firmware update that you want to try that's in beta version, you want to try some of the new features. You can also do this manually without connecting to the Wi-Fi system. To do this, you'll download the file for the update. You'll put it onto a blank SD card that's formatted to FAT32. While the unit is turned off, then you want to put the SD card in the side slot, then fire it up. This will take a few moments here as it first fires up like usual. And once it detects that there's the firmware update on the SD card, it will start the process automatically. Anytime you do a firmware update to the Aeros, it can take approximately 10 minutes to do the entire install. To save a little bit of time, I'm going to fast forward through the updating process. Once the update progress reaches 99%, this may take a few minutes to finish the installation. Don't worry, it's not frozen, it's still working. It just takes a few moments for it to finish the install, and then it will automatically reboot for you. and it will take a few moments, just like when you first turn it on, for it to fire up, and then the main screen will come on. Once the update is completed, this screen is going to pop up, and it's going to say old song format detected. If you haven't backed up your songs, hit no. Remove the SD card, if any, power off the Aeros, and connect the Aeros via USB to your computer. Once connected, power it on again to see all your files and back them up. Okay, now that we have the firmware installed, let's take a look at it under the Updates menu. So as you can see here, this gives us our changelog, the current OS version, and the current firmware update. Okay, now that we've downloaded, installed, and verified the new firmware update, let's take a quick tour of the new menu structure. I'd also like to mention that with this firmware update, almost the entire Aeros has been redesigned to support hands-free operation. You're going to see the normal, familiar icons that you're used to seeing, but you're also going to see a new color palette. So let's take a look here into the settings. As you see now, we have groups of categories of icons of the different functions on board instead of it being one large panel. This makes finding what you need much quicker and efficient. So let's take a quick look at routing. And let's go through each of these. So starting from the top, you're going to see the recording source, main in or auxiliary in, audio output, stereo or mono, loop playback routing, main out or auxiliary out. You can use the wheel then to scroll down. We have the main input routing, we have the auxiliary routing, the click routing, and the VU meter source, which we can monitor from the main in or the auxiliary in. Let's look at behavior next. Your click settings, your click volume, the count in first track, cancel recording, stop song, change song part, auto song part change in 6x6 mode, mute and unmute track, play stop all button, action button mode, auto record, the auto record threshold, clear song confirmation, next track record 6x6, next part record. Let's take a look at MIDI. We have your MIDI channel, MIDI mode, either transmitter or receiver, and start either on record or playback, or both. Under MIDI out, this gives you a few other functions than the MIDI in. You have your MIDI channel, your MIDI mode is a transmitter or receiver, MIDI output, clock sync, time signature, transition, RPO command, start first recording, MIDI out stop, and send stop at empty part. Let's go to the pedal. This allows you to calibrate any expression pedal used. Let's take a look at fades. Now for your fade out time, you can either have it be off, timed, or automatic. If you set timed, you can use the slider bar to adjust your fade out time. Same with fade in time, you can adjust it to off, timed, or auto. You can mute or unmute fade. These will turn on for fade out time and unmute fade in time. Now let's take a look at the system. Now you have your default naming convention where you can decide how you want to automatically name songs as they come up. You have your main input level, so you can do either instrument level or line in level. Sleep screen on or off. The screen brightness. Or you can also restore all default settings or erase content and settings. Under diagnostics, this gives you a lot of power here as well. You have an active logger. You also have a Wi-Fi test, a factory test, Bluetooth test, and MIDI test. Now let's take a look at the hands-free menu. The new firmware update gives you all these new hands-free option slide-out menus, which is really, really cool. It allows you to pack a lot of information into a very small area, and just using hands-free, like with the buttons, allows you to navigate through these. So you have here, playing slide-out menu, stop slide-out menu, keep selection, close menu automatically while playing, close menu automatically when stopped. Now I'd like to mention you can edit the playing slide out menu or edit the stop slide out menu. To do that, click on this, and then using these arrows you can adjust the order at which these things appear. And so if you don't need certain things to appear, you can even turn those off using these radio buttons. So you can decide and customize it to exactly what your needs are while performing or while it's stopped. You can also change the order. So if you don't want the mixer at the top, let's say you want the undo at the top, you can use these arrows and adjust that order so the undo is at the top, or put that back. and you can also reset it as well. Same with the other menu for slide out, stopped. You can do the same thing using the arrows to adjust the order or the radio buttons to pick and choose what you want to have actually in that slide out menu. Now, one thing worth noting, you go under settings, and each of these categories, you can get additional information about each of these categories. So let's go to routing. You're going to see a label here called info that's just above the center button. If you click that, either the label or the button, you're going to get information about what that particular highlighted feature does. So for example, we have recording source. Let's go to audio output. This gives information about that and so forth. This goes through each one of these categories. When you highlight it, it will give you information about what that particular item does. Let's take a look at the songs submenu. You now have the choice of the internal or the SD card. This will give you a breakdown of any songs that are installed. Now, presently, I don't have anything installed. Same with the SD card. Gives you the same kind of functionality. Quick start guide. Then use the Start Stop All button to go back out of that. Under Updates, if there are any new ones, you can look at that here. That also gives you your changelog, your current OS version, and your current firmware update. And you can also run diagnostics from that too. That'll bring you over the diagnostic menu straight from the Updates menu. I'd like to thank all of you for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for additional news, information, tutorials, and other videos on all of our groundbreaking products here at Singular Sound. Be sure to go to singularsound.com and be sure to check out all of our social media channels for additional information. From Singular Sound, I'm Joe Vitale Jr.